Part 1. A strange call. It was still dark. A thin fog, like a pale, white curtain, lay over the Wyoming Valley where pine forest met the broad grasslands. The first light of dawn only just began to slip through the gaps in the leaves, dyeing the dew-laden grass golden, but the silence did not last. A howl echoed, cold, lingering, as if cutting through every fiber of the air. The sound bounced off the cliffs, startling the sleeping sparrows into a frantic flight. Then everything fell silent, a strange kind of silence, as though even nature itself was holding its breath. Ethan woke up because of that sound. He lived alone in an old wooden house on the mountainside, where only the wind, the snow, and memories kept him company. Strange noises were not new to him, but this morning, something felt very different. When he stepped out onto the porch, Ethan froze. In front of him, just a few steps away, stood a coyote. It did not growl, did not flee. It stood still, its gray-brown fur catching the dim light, its golden eyes glowing unnaturally. Those eyes seemed to bore into him, not with the wild gaze of a predator, but something else, a sense of urgency, as if it were here to deliver a message. A morning breeze rustled, making its fur tremble as if dry grass were at the verge of burning. The coyote raised its head and let out another howl. That sound wasn't like a call to the pack, nor did it carry threat. It sounded like a plea for help, an omen. Ethan didn't move. His instincts warned him that if he stepped closer, something would change forever. It felt as though he stood on the boundary between the human world and something ancient and primal, where the map held no outlines, and only instinct remained a guide. Why my porch? He wondered. What does it want? But the animal just waited. A long, motionless look, full of implication. Then it lowered its head, and Ethan saw something that made his heart seize. In its mouth, glinting in the early sunlight, was a silver necklace. Part 2. An object from the past. Ethan descended the wooden steps, his legs still trembling from what he had just seen. The coyote did not run away. It stood there, unnaturally silent as if a living statue, its eyes fixed on his every breath. He bent slightly, hand reaching out, not exactly to take it, but to verify that the glint was not a hallucination. A cold gust cut through his jacket, yet his body did not shiver from the cold. His heart pounded so hard that his ears rang, drowning out even the wind. The necklace slipped to the ground when the coyote surprisingly released it. A dry clink rang out in the silence, like the hammering of a nail into the past. Ethan picked it up. It was a round pendant, a bit worn, silver dulled by time, but in the center, a delicate five-pointed star was still etched clearly. His hand shook. There was no mistaking it. He had placed that very necklace around her neck with his own hands. The day they last laughed together, Anna, his little sister, had disappeared 6 years ago, leaving behind no trace except the paralysis and shattering of their family. He remembered clearly, that day, Anna wore this necklace. She never took it off, because it had been her last birthday present from their mother, who had died of cancer when they were in high school. Ethan gripped the pendant tightly, goosebumps rising on his skin. Emotions surged like a flood. Memories, hope, buried pain, locked away underground, burst forth like a box that had been sealed shut for too long. "How?" he whispered, looking at the coyote. "Where did you find it?" Of course, the coyote didn't respond, but it turned, stepping off the porch. No run, just gliding away like a silent ghost. Before disappearing into the trees, it paused and looked back at Ethan one last time. An invitation, a challenge, or something even deeper. Ethan rushed inside, slamming the door as though afraid his emotions outside might sweep him away. He collapsed into a chair, the necklace in his hand like a tangible remnant of a surreal dream. But the metallic scent, the fine layer of dust on his skin, it was all unmistakably real. His phone lay there. With one call he could alert the police, a wildlife expert, or a missing persons investigator. But he did not pick it up. Something inside him resisted, as though that necklace was a signal, not meant for institutions or systems, but meant specifically for him. He thought back to that day, to how Anna had vanished. On a morning just as peaceful as any other, she had said she'd go to the bakery in the nearby town to pick up a wedding cake. But she never returned. No one saw her, no surveillance caught her, no signs of a struggle, not a trace of brake marks. Police searched for 3 relentless months. Then his parents fell, one to illness, the other to despair. Ethan withdrew to live as a recluse in his grandparents' cabin, hiding himself from the world. But now, that necklace had appeared from the mouth of a coyote. His reason told him, this makes no sense. But his instincts screamed, something has begun to move, and it's bigger than him, bigger than anything he's ever known. That night, Ethan did not sleep. He left the light on and stared at the pendant as if he could will time back by gazing at it. He remembered every crease in Anna's brow, the playful lilt of her voice teasing him. He also remembered his mother's eyes when she said, "She is stronger than she looks." Ethan, but strength still needs someone to protect it. By dawn the next day, he heard the howl again. It was the coyote. This time, he did not hesitate. He grabbed his coat, pulled on his tall boots, and slipped the necklace into his inside pocket. When he opened the door, he saw the animal standing at the edge of the forest, just a few dozen feet from the house. It did not run, did not howl, it just watched. Ethan stepped forward. No more hesitation, no more fear, only a dim belief that behind that gaze lay a path toward truth. Even if it was shrouded in darkness, it was the only path left. Part 3. Guided through the dark, dawn returned, and like some ancient ritual, the coyote howled again, its call echoing through the valley like a silent invitation meant for Ethan. Pale light pierced through the pine branches, dyeing the thin mist just outside his porch. The coyote stood still, its golden eyes seeming to illuminate a hidden path, one only he could see. Ethan felt his heart stop, then suddenly leap to life, an unexplainable sensation beyond logic. Without hesitation, he stepped outside. His pack was light, but his thoughts were heavy. The coyote did not leave. It became a living map in the morning light, each step whispering of a strange and secret place. It turned sharply and entered the forest. Ethan followed, as if pulled by an invisible thread. His footsteps crunched on dry leaves and decaying wood, the sound soft like a slow pour. The trees stretched out like gray fingers. There were no birds, no rustle of other animals, only the steady breathing of a man walking into a space between fear and hope. The coyote's prints led Ethan deep into an abandoned forest. Fallen trees lay thick with moss. Rotten beams lay scattered, remnants of an old roof, echoes of a hunting camp from decades past. The last rays of light pierced through the broken boards, painting faint streaks across layers of dust. Ethan froze when he saw a familiar warning sign, a tattered leather satchel, abandoned under a tree, identical to the backpack Anna used to carry during their last hike together. The fabric was worn, the zipper tangled, but the little pattern still remained, tiny sunflower dots. Gripping it, Ethan felt his bones go cold, but his skin burned hot. His heart ached from the memories. A golden afternoon, laughter echoing along the forest trail. Anna had asked casually, "Do you believe I will always come back?" He remembered nodding, saying, "Always." Now, he stood in the ruins of time, the backpack a haunting relic. The air thickened, a creaking sound came from beneath the roots of a withered tree. Ethan flinched, his heart pounding. He tilted his head, trying to trace the source. Something small rolled across the ground. When he bent to pick it up, he found a bent zipper, stained with dried blood. Then, hidden among the bushes, a scrap of red fabric, like Anna's scarf. He dared not hope, but fear rushed in like a wave. Ethan stood frozen, while the coyote had already disappeared into the canopy. Now it was just him and the memories, reminders of the darkest days of his life. Guilt rose within him, the guilt of not being strong enough to protect Anna when she vanished without a trace. Now he felt cornered between truth and unresolved pain. Yet a strange force pulled him onward, as though her spirit was still reaching out from somewhere far away. Fear gave way to resolve. Ethan picked up the fabric, folding it in his trembling hands. He took a deep breath, trying to quiet the thundering of his heart. He told himself, "I had to keep going, even if it is darkness. I must keep going." He walked on, flinching at every rustle of branches. The old trail led to a dense cluster of trees. There, innocence and horror met, a narrow plank stuck against a trunk. And next to it, a pool of dried, blackened blood, sticky and unmoving. Despair threatened to explode in his chest. He dropped to his knees, the metallic stench overwhelming. Death, Thick and permanent, the red cloth, the zipper, the backpack, they told a story that could not be ignored, would not let him look away. The coyote had long vanished from sight, but its spirit seemed to remain, guiding each step, not loudly, not clearly, but without mistake. As Ethan rose, eyes glistening, he knew he could not stop. Each step forward carried Anna's voice. You had to find out, you must know. Though she never spoke those words, he believed it was a message from the other side of the abyss. When the first light of day filtered through the trees, sparkling on dust particles, he turned his chest toward the glow, the only direction that mattered now, in the darkness of the deep forest and the mystery still unresolved. Part 4. Truth in the Morning Light. As the first rays of the new day broke through the thick leaves, Ethan continued quietly deeper into the forest, his eyes fixed on the coyote's tracks left behind on the damp earth. There were no more sounds. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath, and in that moment, the creature appeared once again. It stood on a small rise, unmoving and silent, its golden eyes still pierced through like they had the very first night they met. Ethan moved closer, and the coyote stepped back, just once, as if inviting him towards something hidden behind. Beyond the rise was a patch of thick grass and rocks, piled as if someone had tried to hide something. And indeed, beneath the layered stones was an old bunker. The wooden hatch had rotted and been torn apart by wind and rain, revealing a dark entrance, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. Ethan's hands trembled as he brushed aside the grass. A section of the planks had flipped open, revealing a staircase, its steps broken and crumbling. The coyote stared at him, unmoving. Ethan looked back one last time. There was no encouragement, no warning, only a gaze, deep and still. Then Ethan stepped down. The air inside was thick and heavy, full of rust, mildew, and something else, the stench of death. His footsteps slowed. One hand touched the rotting wood walls. The light from his phone barely lit the narrow path, where spider webs hung like threads of time abandoned. At the bottom level, he stopped, a human shape, curled in the corner of the bunker, clothes shredded, shoes decayed, the body shriveled, frozen in a final scream. The face was unrecognizable, destroyed by time, but the long dark hair, the sharp cheekbones, the small frame. Anna, Ethan whispered, pain stabbing through his chest. But no, next to the body was something that froze him completely. A silver necklace, identical to the one the coyote had brought, rested around the corpse's neck. There could not be two necklaces alike in every detail. Ethan knelt, his hands shaking as he flipped the pendant. The five-pointed star was still there, but engraved on the back was the letter R. It was not Anna's. Then who? Before he could process it, his phone's light fell on something else. The dead hand of the woman, clutching a small object. Ethan hesitated, then inhaled deeply and opened the stiff, dry fingers. A letter. The paper was crumpled, soaked, the ink smeared, but some of the messy handwriting was still legible. I'm not the girl you are looking for, but I know her. She saved me. She was taken. If anyone finds me, go west of the old camp, where the broken pine lies next to the heart-shaped rock. She is there. The last line was soaked in blood. No name, no date. Ethan could barely breathe. Horror, hope, and pain all stacked on top of each other like layers of earth over a buried stranger. A girl had died, but before she did, she wrote that Anna had saved her, that Anna had been taken. Impossible. Anna could not still be alive. 6 years, in the forest, without a single trace. He wanted to cry, but could not. The feeling inside him went beyond tears. It was panic, the kind that comes when the line between life and death bends, when hope becomes more dangerous than despair. Ethan stood, stumbling, scanning the bunker once more. There were marks he did not understand, scratches on the planks, dried blood smears, claw marks dug into the walls. Maybe this place had once been a prison. Maybe it was part of something bigger. As he stepped out, the bright light of dawn blurred his vision. On top of the mound, the coyote was still there, silent, like a guardian between two worlds. Ethan looked at it. Why? He asked, his voice nearly cracked. The coyote did not reply, but its eyes said everything. The deep sorrow that did not belong to wild beasts, a sadness only souls who have known loss could understand. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the police. He knew he had to do the right thing, report the body, contact the authorities, but inside, he knew this was not the end. Not after that letter, not if Anna might still be somewhere out there in these woods. And above all, he knew, without that coyote, he never would have found any of this. Part 5. The guide disappears. The police arrived later that afternoon, just as the sun cast long shadows across the dry forest of Wyoming. Ethan stood at the edge of the bunker, wind blowing hard, causing his jacket to flap like a sail ready to tear. His face looked hollow, and his hand gripped the letter, now sealed between two sheets of temporary plastic. Forensics collected the body, step by careful step, as though afraid they might shatter stories no one had dared to touch. Ethan did not say much. He shared only what was necessary: the bunker, the necklace, the letter, but he never mentioned the coyote. Because how could he? Who would believe that a wild animal had led him to a secret buried for 6 years? Who would believe that its eyes had carried a message, a reminder, and a sorrow not belonging to any beast? As twilight fell and the police slowly packed up, Ethan stood motionless. He looked toward the forest, toward the place where the coyote had vanished after he made the call. It had not returned since. He walked to the mound where the animal had stood, staring at him before fading into the trees like a shadow. And then, he saw it, a thin trail of fresh blood, still wet, streaked across the fallen leaves, winding toward a dense patch of underbrush. Ethan knelt and placed a hand on the ground. The coyote's footprints were faint now, soft impressions as if it was growing weaker, dissolving into the earth. He followed the trail, his steps feather-light, the blood thinned, the tracks vanished, and finally, there was only wind, no howl, no shape, no sound. The forest returned to its primal silence, as though nothing had ever happened. Ethan stood there for a long time. An emptiness welled up inside him, strange and unfamiliar, not because the coyote had gone, but because he knew it was not coming back. It had come to guide, and now that the door to the truth had opened, it had no reason to stay. He felt grateful, and a quiet ache he could not name, because in that final look the animal gave him, there had been more than duty. Was it loss? Was it hope? Was it a piece of spirit passed on to him? The only one willing to listen, to believe, and to follow. Ethan sat at the base of a tree, pulled the necklace from his jacket, and placed it in his palm. He looked at it under the fading light, its silver pendant catching the red glow of sunset. He thought of Anna, of the girl in the bunker, of the letter, of where the broken pine lies next to the heart-shaped rock. Another destination, another secret. The coyote had shown him the first place, but the next, he would have to find it on his own. He would have to become the one who walks in the dark. And as the sun dipped fully behind the distant mountains, Ethan stood. He gazed into the forest one last time, then turned, his feet heavy but his heart clearer than ever. Some creatures only appear when we need them, and then they leave, without thanks, without medals. They leave only questions. Just like that coyote, it did not need Ethan to understand it, only to keep going. Part 6. Between man and beast, there are threads that cannot be seen with the naked eye, thin as wind, but stronger than chains of steel. That was the thread between Ethan and the coyote, between man and nature, between reason and the things beyond understanding. After that night, no one ever saw the coyote again, even though the police set up camp near the bunker. Even though townsfolk whispered stories about the missing, no one spoke of a creature that guided the way. Only Ethan, the only one who had seen its eyes at dawn, still held the story in his heart. He did not need to retell it, because he understood. Some things are only meant to be felt, not proven. The coyote had not just shown him the way, it had brought him back to himself. It reminded him that this world is not only a place of logic and reason, but also a place of spirit, of buried pain, and of love that never disappears. Ethan returned to the forest every day, continuing to search for the place where the broken pine lies next to the heart-shaped rock. Not because he was sure he would find it, but because he could not stop walking. Each step into the woods now was an answer to a call from long ago. Not from Anna, not from a missing girl, but from within himself, from the part of his soul he had forgotten for too long. He was no longer afraid, because he knew that some miracles only come to those who dared to listen, who dared to look into the eyes of a wild creature and not turn away, Perhaps we will never fully understand nature, but sometimes nature understands us and chooses to whisper to those willing to be still and listen. Sometimes the truth and even salvation comes from the beings we thought were the most unfamiliar. And when the dawn light shattered once again through the canopy, Ethan looked up and saw, whether in memory or in truth, those golden eyes shimmering as if they had never left, as if still watching over a bond that can never be broken between man and beast.